We are live. Welcome back to the ARTFUL Podcast, guys. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, click the button. I'm waiting. Did you click the button? I'm still waiting. Subscribe? Yeah? Yet? No? Cool. And welcome back to the podcast. Today we have another artist, and she's a painter, which I saw on Instagram, and it was really interesting, the kind of painting that she does, and I was really curious to talk to the artist and see how she approached the painting, what's her drive, and just have a little chat with the artist, and we're gonna talk about obviously painting. She's a portrait painter, and I'm really intrigued by what she has to say. Before we go into the talk, guys, I was wondering, what do you think about this new every 2 weeks episode? I decide for every episode is really good for me to post and keep talking to people, keep saying to people to just go to YouTube or Spotify and listen to the episode. And I feel like 2 weeks is it's a good amount of time for me as well to find interesting artists to interview, or find a really good argument to talk in the episode. So I decide that every 2 weeks I will release an episode, and I think it's a good amount of time for people to reach out and for me to organize the interview, or for me to organize the episode in general. So let me know what you think. And without further ado, this was Jessica Studio Chat. Today we have Jessica with us, and why you don't introduce yourself, Jessica, to where you're from, what you're doing, how is your practice influence you and everything.
Okay, so my name is Jessica Russo SCHERR, and I'm an American who is currently living in Germany. I have lived in 4 or 5 different countries over the past many years, mostly driven by my interest in art. I work in a variety of different media, but most of that has to deal with this combination of memories, locations, and portraits, and they usually come together in terms of painting and collage, but not always.
Okay, so is that how you start usually your painting, or?
Yes, I usually it's the concept that drives what I decide to do, a painting or a collage or some other type of material. It always has to do with the concept or the idea behind it first.
Okay. The question that I ask usually to start with, as it's a really weird time we are living in, how did the COVID situation influence you, your practice, you just in general? How did you manage the lockdown?
Yes, well, I am currently actually in the last day of being in quarantine for another lockdown. So I am currently still feeling all of these things. Fortunately, I get out tomorrow. So, it was really distressing at first because I do have children, teacher. So because I went on lockdown didn't mean that my job teaching art, and I teach art at a Frankfurt International School, and I had to continue teaching, and basically my job switched roles overnight. And not only that, but I had to assist my children. So it was really hard for me at first to think creatively because all my creative energy, my actual workplace. But then I found a sweet spot, and I transformed my I transformed my kitchen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just heard a click. So I transformed my kitchen into a studio. I have this whole big area so I could still maintain observation over my children, but still create art. And I just had such a creative spurt. I needed that outlet during the spring and the summer. It was, a necessity for survival for me.
I know what you mean.
Yes, and I'm still in that very strong creative spurt right now. Still making art every day.
Good. Are you still because I saw that you work pretty big. So is that why why was it a problem at the beginning to find like a proper space and set up?
I did have to downsize my work. But I do tend to vary in size. I go through these spurts where sometimes I work very big and sometimes I work very small. And a lot of that has to do with external constraints on my life, I have to work with whatever space I'm in. And if I have space in my studio, then I'm working big. And if I have to work in my kitchen, I'm working smaller. So it really is okay for me.
You don't mind
I
much.
like having that variation.
I would say you don't mind that much to vary the size of your painting, of your artworks.
No. There's certain beautiful things about being able to work very small and intimately, and there's such magical things when you work really big and really express yourself.
Cool. I find it really hard for me working on big size, just because I get lost. I think I'm not used to it. It just I feel like I get lost where to go, where to start, and it's a big space to cover. So it's just like I'm just used to like normal kind of size of painting, or even smaller. I just find it more just more intimate and more comfortable for me to paint. But so if you have that, you can change it up and no problem. It's just
I totally get, like working smaller, it is that sort of intimate experience. And working larger, you can very easily get lost into something, but it's almost, the techniques are almost completely different.
Is what's your background? So did you study art? Did you just end up being an artist? Did you self-taught?
Hello?
Hi, can you
Oh.
Hi.
Now I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I was just wondering what's your background. So if you did ever any education in art, did you do art school, or it was just you? Yeah.
No, I did my undergraduate. I got a bachelor's in fine arts, and then after that, this is a little ridiculous. So I am very much a believer in education. And I guess that's also why I'm an art teacher. So after that, I went to 4 separate universities and received different certificates and masters in art and art education. So I have probably the equivalent of a doctorate.
Oh, great.
Fine arts. So I've had a little bit of education in it, but that's really where. I in the school atmosphere, like being
Yeah.
constantly being surrounded by people who are creating art just fuels my creativity.
It's a really big part. I found during the lockdown, I did quite a lot of art, like quite a lot of works, but I got to the point that I kind of feel the need to talk to like somebody about art. It's one of the main reason why I did start this podcast. Is just give me the opportunity to like speak to artists that I will probably never met, but that's the beauty of like technology now. You can just call and have a little chat, and it's just great. It just fills you up, and it's really good. I completely agree. Be surrounded by artists or people that are creative is really important for somebody that creates art. And yeah. And did your practice change through the lots of years of studies that you did?
Yes. The funny thing is I talk about how education was really helpful, but it also was hurtful in some ways. I think sometimes you get so many opinions that sometimes you lose track of what's really genuine inside you that you're trying to create. And so I think I hit a rough patch for some years where I just was kind of all over the place. And then I, hit a point where I was like, screw it. This is what I want to do. This is my life. I can create this the way I want to. And, what that one professor said or one class said during a critique, that didn't really matter. And once I let go of that, I realized that my work hasn't changed drastically throughout my career. It has evolved, and there's certainly different branches off of it, but it really has been me exploring some of the same issues over and over again in different ways and from different perspectives.
That's really interesting, because sometimes it's true, you can just get caught up in like opinions, and you just double question yourself, and you're like, you don't know what to do really. Because you see them as like your teacher or your tutor or somebody that's supposed to know better than you, and sometimes it can be really heartbreaking if he doesn't match what you're thinking. But it's just an opinion really. It doesn't really it doesn't really has to be that important for you. And why did you end up being an art teacher? Because did you love the academy kind of environment, and you decide to just be a teacher in the end?
Most likely, when I was in art school as an undergrad, my classmates would, if they asked for a question or I helped someone, they would say, "Oh, you're really good. You should be a teacher." And so that kind of stuck with me. And I needed a career. I needed to do something when I graduated, and I knew that only creating my artwork was not going to sustain me. I came from a not terribly wealthy family by any stretch of the imagination. And I had a lot of university bills to pay off. So I was waiting tables, I was a cocktail waitress, and I was working at an art supply store. And I said, I really can't wait tables all my life. I like what I'm doing at the art supply store because I get to teach people about these different materials. And I said, I think being a teacher might be the right way to go. And I originally wanted to be a university professor, but I decided that was going to be further off and I needed cash sooner. So I got my certification to teach kindergarten through grade 12, and realized that I didn't want to be in the university setting at all, with all sorts of, tenure politics and trying to move up the ladder. And all of that backstabbing stuff that I witnessed while I was going to school. And I loved being in a high school environment. The kids wanted to be there. They were excited. I found that I had a really good rapport with them. And that was what really drove me to stay in education. And I realized that even when I go through spurts where my work is selling very, very well, I would not be giving up education, because it is that, like I mentioned earlier, being in that atmosphere helps me be more creative.
Something that you care deeply about, and it helps you stay in focus with the art. Oh, that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about your practice, because I was going through your website and I saw that you do collage, which is really interesting, as like you do a lot of painting as well and drawing. And is it just another way to express what you want to do? And
I used to do like in university, I did a little bit of collage, but it wasn't my main thing. But when I was in my 20s, I was in early 30s, I was in a car accident. And it wasn't horrible, but it did leave me having trouble holding a paintbrush for a while.
Okay.
I had some back problems, and it was just really tough, creating art where I had to hold a paintbrush. So I started creating my first collage, which was, it must have been about 160 by 210 centimeters.
Whoa.
Massive.
Big,
self-portrait. Yeah, really big, made up of very, very small pieces of paper. Very small.
Oh, that sounds intense.
About the size of my fingerprint. And I just would be able to put one up and then put my arm down and rest, put another one up. And I worked pretty much straight for 3 weeks. And I was like, you know what? I really like this. I like working this way. And I've been doing collage ever since, and figuring out different ways that I could really push the limit of that material. And how I paint in a very similar way that I use collage. A lot of it is when you're up close, you really see the material, and when you're further away, everything comes together. And you see a different image.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you managed to find a way to mix the collage technique with the painting. Oh, that's really interesting. And how do you work specifically? Like, do you have a do you work by photography, or I don't know, sitting?
Mostly, because I'm also a mom and I have to work sometimes in strange hours or
busy life,
the middle, early in the morning, late at night, whenever I can. I can't always work if I have a model there. So I do use photographs a lot more, but I tend not to use just one photographic source. I'll photograph the person, and I'll usually use a range of photos, so I can try to capture more of the spirit of the person rather than just a likeness to one photograph.
Okay, I do work the same. I do portrait mostly, and I've been drawing for the last couple of years only, and I come back on painting the last few months during lockdown, really. And I did to work from photos most of the time, because obviously I couldn't meet people, and photo is always obviously better in a way that you don't feel that bad for a person that have to sit for 4 hours in front of you, and most likely it's your girlfriend or it's your friend. You're like, I'm sorry, can you just stay another hour? But yeah, photo it's always really good, so you capture the moment and try to reproduce in your way. And yeah, so so do you do the photo, and then how do you approach the canvas or the collage? Do you still do in collage, or is it?
Yes. No, I'm still doing collage. I work on both in different spurts.
Okay.
But I approach both of them in a similar way. I usually just start drawing and planning out the composition. I sometimes do some preliminary sketches, but most of the time I'm so excited when I get the photos that I start working, and I'm like, you know what, if it doesn't work out, I'll paint over it. If it doesn't work out, I'll and so it's completely opposite the way that I teach my students to like plan and, make little thumbnail sketches. I just dive in. But I think a lot of that also comes from experience. I know
how to jump steps and stuff.
I know how to skip a few steps sometimes, and I know if something's going off that I can, if the proportions are falling off, I know, like, okay, let me just, use these tricks with looking at the photograph to,
fix it up,
measure the proportions and readjust. And so I usually just dive in. The only thing that I make sure I always do is I work on an underpainting, or I have the canvas, whether I'm doing collage or painting, I cover the surface so it's not white. Usually I use something very dark or blue as the background, sometimes burnt sienna. And I'll use that as the foundation that I build my work off of.
Pretty classic, I will say, as a start. Because watching, seeing your outcome, it doesn't give the vibe that you, have that classic vibe of like painting. But as a starter, it sounds like really it's a typical way how to start a painting, really.
Yes.
And then you transform in these beautiful, ginormous artworks that are incredible.
Thank you.
So after the whole preparation of the canvas, you just jump with colors into it, and then you just try to
I usually start fairly monochromatic as far as for painting. I will usually start with my darkest darks.
Nice.
And then my lightest lights to try to create a value scale. So I know what parameters I'm working in, and then I slowly build in the midtones from each of those points. And once I have the values locked in, then I start to experiment more with color and the transitions between those different value zones.
Nice. And do you jump to colors quite straight, like, because they are really colorful and powerful, and the way you use the color, it's really captivating. So
thank you. I think because I use an underpainting, I don't always go into more of the colorful parts until later. Because so much of the underpainting is coming through and adding that color. So I think that comes a little bit further along, probably when I start really adding a little bit more detail. Then I'll go in, and I love, like when I'm painting with oils or acrylics, I love glazing, and that's usually where I start having a lot of fun with color.
Nice. Do you have something that I'm really that's my favorite question to ask to artists, the subject matter that you like to paint or like doing art for? Is that, do you have a specific one, or it's something that you just go along with the painting, or just a picture that you like?
The first part of your question cut out a little bit. Could you repeat it?
I was just asking if your subject matter, if you have a specific subject matter that you like to approach and to with your art, or is it just like people that you like, or like faces that you like, portrait that you like to do?
They're almost always people that I know, and people that I know fairly well. So
do you need do you need to have that connection?
Go ahead.
Sorry, do you need to have that connection of like knowing the person that you're going to paint?
it helps. Whenever I get commissions to paint people I don't know, it's just a struggle for me. I don't enjoy the work so much. I don't mind doing commissions, but I prefer those works to be not necessarily portraits. I prefer to do some other work, but I don't always do portraits. Since I move around a lot, I do find the first year or two that I'm living in another country, I struggle with doing portraits because I'm just haven't built up those relationships yet.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of other types of they're landscapes of sorts, but usually it's me working out some current events or some political matters via collage or painting and architecture and landscape.
So it's really varies from like the present situation for you. So if you have like a close friends, you will do portrait. If it's not, you just play with like landscapes.
Yes.
Oh, I wish I could do that. I try landscapes so many times, and it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel. I can do it fairly okay. It doesn't feel like when I paint a person. It's just it's really personal. It gets really personal. So it's just, I feel better for me to paint a person.
Yeah, I understand that completely.
And when do you obviously you need to know the person very well to paint or the landscape for you to, like, I don't know the cities maybe that you're living into. But what does it inspire you to paint the person or paint that landscape?
I would love to say that I know exactly what it is, but it's more sometimes it's just I do a lot of photography, so I might take a photo of someone and just be like, oh, hey, do you mind if I use this, because I really need to paint this.
It's just a feeling.
I just see something and I'm like, that would make an amazing painting. Or sometimes a lot of times my students will say, hey, can you paint me? And most of the time I have to say no, because I have many students and I couldn't possibly paint everyone. But sometimes I'm like, sure. So right at the beginning of the summer, we were in lockdown, but we were able to come back to school for the last 2-3 weeks of school under a lot of restrictions. And I photographed a bunch of my students' eyes. And it was just so nice to see them in person, but their faces were all covered in masks. So I was just focusing on eyes, and I'm still kind of working on this series of just my students' eyes, and filling up this wall with various size photos of eyes. And just the other day, one of my students showed me a picture of her eye, and she was talking about what color her eyes were. I was like, oh, can I paint that? So sometimes it's just a spontaneous thing.
Yeah.
And then she emails me the photo, and then, as soon as I get a moment, I'll start painting it.
Do you use a lot of sketching before, or you go straight away into painting?
Most of the time I do a lot of sketching, but that's not necessarily in preparation for the painting. That's just anytime I am sitting still, I'm sketching. So if there's a movie on, I'm sketching. If I'm in a meeting, I'm sketching. So I do a lot of sketching, but it's not necessarily sketching of what I'm going to paint next.
Okay. Does everything influence you? As like, what's the biggest thing that influence you that you like to sketch while you're like doing something else? Really.
I think it all depends on my mood at the time. I do a lot of very detailed sketches with pens, dealing with a lot of pattern and hidden imagery. And that tends to happen on these times when I'm not feeling overly creative, but I need to create, but I'm just kind of stuck. And I need to, it's almost like a type of meditation.
Yeah.
And I can focus in on small detail and just, use crosshatch and shade a small area for like 3 hours and just get lost into it and not really think about the bigger picture and what happens with that. So sometimes it's not necessarily an inspiration, but it's because I'm not inspired. I'm just needing some meditation.
You use that to refocus and come back on the momentum. That's sounds like what I do all the time. It's literally like I do a lot of like sketches, but they're always random. So like random scene, if I'm in a cafe or somewhere else on the beach, of a stranger, they sit down there and on the bench, I'm just sketching. And it's not, I know I'm never going to paint that drawing or that picture, but it's just something that, it's a literally, I think it's literally the meditation that you're talking about. It's a way for us to not thinking about stuff of life.
Exactly.
Seeing your art, it's, I'm always intrigued by what's the artists that inspire you. If you have a specific art movement, or in general, like just a random artists that you like, and that, because sometimes when I talk to artists, most of them they're really surprising. So if they're printmaking, they're really into really old painting, and so it doesn't really match with what they do, but that's what they inspire you. So it's really interesting for me to understand, to like question, to ask what.
Well, that's kind of like me. I am very much into Renaissance art, and to the point where I moved to Florence, Italy for 9 years.
Ooh.
So I had been going to Florence when I lived in the States every summer with students. And then I told my students, one day I'm going to disappear and I'm going to be in Florence. and I did that.
Love it.
So Renaissance art, Artemisia Gentileschi, the way she paints just is incredible. But being in a city surrounded by art constantly is what kind of creates my inspiration.
The magical,
the textures of the city, the statues everywhere I walk, and it's just breathtaking.
So I'm from south of Italy, and and there is a lot of art, obviously, and it's just randomly placed in the city, and you living there, you don't realize it, and it's a normal thing, but it's not. It's really not.
But it's not. And that's what I was very curious. I wanted to know, how can you live in this place and think that this is normal? And I never got to that point where I thought it was normal. It was always breathtaking to walk out of my apartment and walk past the Duomo and just see all of these things, go into the Uffizi in the afternoon. We're in South Italy. Dove siete?
I'm from Puglia, so
okay.
The hill of the boot. The southest part of Italy. Beautiful place. A lot of like Baroque art. If you go to like Lecce,
I've been to Lecce.
The Salento part. It's a really rich part, like art scenario there. So it's sometimes I really miss it on that sense. It's just I live in the UK right now, and It's just different art, different cathedral, beautiful cities. Sometimes you really find some beautiful cities. It's not what I'm used to, and you just miss it, and it's okay, but at the same time.
I feel quite similar living in Frankfurt after living in Florence for so long. I love living here. There's beautiful things here. There's so many wonderful things, but to be able to just walk out your door and be surrounded by art and architecture, it's just and the food.
Let's not forget. Yeah.
Having a hard time being out of Italy. We went back just before Corona. It was mid-February, and we drove down and loaded our car up with food. So we were all ready for the lockdown. Our car was filled with pasta and sauce and fagioli, you name it. Scacciata.
Oh, I had my parents come in visit here after the all lockdown situation. Finally, they managed to come here, and they came with like 20 kilo of luggage full of food. There was nothing else in the luggage. It was just food, and I was so happy. But
yes.
What can you do?
Yes.
Anyway, it was a great talk. Thank you very much, Jessica,
My pleasure.
spend this time with me and to be part of the podcast.
My pleasure. It was lovely speaking to you, Matteo.
Oh, thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
You too. Ciao.
Ciao. Bye. And great talk. Oh, lovely lady. Jessica. Don't forget to follow Jessica Russo. Jessica Russo on Instagram, and just give her a follow. She does beautiful artworks. And anyway, guys, I think that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. It will really help the channel to grow. And from the Artful Podcast, I'm out.